Hey guys, and welcome to another video. It's been about a week. I hope you all enjoyed your Christmas holidays as much as I seem to have, just by the fact, pretty much this past week I seem to have spent most of my time sleeping. Apparently, I can't drink alcohol anymore without having days and days and days on end of tiredness. But as promised, today we are going to be having a look at the competition that was running through basically the last quarter of the year. This was a competition in which you guys could win gems from me from doing a variety of different things, but the main creative one we had was simply stuff to do with Living World Season 3. Any fan art, and I made that a particularly broad category. It's fan fiction, stories that people wrote, actual art that people would do, whether that be digitally or actually, you know, with pen and paper, or things like sculptures or music, trailers, any of that stuff. You guys have been submitting to me in an awesome thread over on Reddit for the past 3 months, and today I want to announce the winners. And yes, I do mean winners with a plural there, because I couldn't just have one guy take some gems away from so much cool stuff. So I've actually decided there are 5 art winners. People who won the other competitions and stuff like liking the videos and stuff, they should be in your YouTube PM box over the next couple of days at the very most. But so yeah, let's have a look at the art stuff. This is the stuff we can all share in and all be quite enthusiastic about. We've got a variety of categories, and what I'm going to do is try to show off everything I can, and then we'll do the 5 winners right at the end. So let's just jump straight in with the music category, and this is actually what you guys should be hearing in the background of the video for a little while, but I'll play a little bit explicitly for you as well. First is this piece from Yuz Shen, who kind of wanted to do a militaristic version of the Heart of Thorn soundtrack. Actually ended up sounding a little bit, as was said on the thread, a little bit like the login screen music, but then blends into one of the other themes in quite a nice way. And for all of this stuff, guys, there will be links in the description for everything, particularly the Reddit thread where everything was found, if you want to check it out. And a lot of it you're going to want to, probably. The other track you will hear in this video is from Woolpy the Sheeps, who kind of designed some music of what they'd like one of the future zones to sound like. It reminded me of Sonic. I don't know, what can I say? It's not super Guild Wars, I will say straight away, but it's still a nice track, and it conjured to me some interesting ideas of, like, jungly levels. We also have, in the video category, a single submission. This was from Sparko Gredi, who did a trailer for Season 3. Now, if you're watching right now in the background, you'll see that that's rolling. And it gets points from me for being kind of a weird idea, but specifically as well, I think they emulate the style of the Guild Wars trailers quite well. Maybe not some of the recent ones, but those of you who have been playing for a while, specifically through the Season 1 stuff, you'll know they did a very particular style of trailer where they had the music, it would go to a black screen, they'd throw some kind of a caption up, it would go into a black screen again, then it would show you some kind of a clip. It's around the right length, and it definitely put a smile on my face for that reason, so that was pretty cool, and the only trailer we had. So good job for doing something interesting that nobody else did, at the very least. So the next category I want to look at with you guys are map designs. A lot of you guys did this stuff. So the first one is from Kite GR, who submitted this little bit of art here, but specifically talked about the a kind of an implausible idea for the future of the game, revolving around the Crystal Desert, because of course, who doesn't love the Crystal Desert? But the interesting idea here is the notion that we can have the Crystal Desert almost as one entirely huge map, all on its own. This is something that I've speculated about before, specifically when it comes to the Deljamore front. I don't know whether the engine will ever have the capability of doing this, but building on that, and building on the idea of masteries, they were talking about the idea of having everything as a large sand sea that you have to learn to surf across. This is something I'm hugely in favor of. Arena I've actually got 2 big options if we do end up going to the desert. One of them is the Janundu, of course. The other is this sand surfing idea. And then even had some really bizarre things that I never would have conceived of, like the idea of having, like, instead of just guild halls, you could have guild crafts that can travel across the sand. So a really cool idea. And actually, the idea of going to the desert was a fairly common theme for a lot of us. Not just the desert, though. Surprise, surprise to me was people who liked the idea of going to the Northern Shiver Peaks. And the first of these that I'm going to talk about for you guys here is Tirak's Frostfire Peaks idea. Tirak actually did a few little maps. This was the art that sort of inspired them at the very least. And so this is one of their ideas. Now, this was basically the notion that we could be going north to look specifically at not just Jormag, but Primordus too. And so as you can see on the map, as we have lovely annotated, Kraukatoric was running from Primordus is the theory. I mean, why did Kralkador go south is the idea, you know, if you don't buy that it's just because Glint was there and it was all the trap and so forth. And it moved down, and obviously Primordus had already been awake, so that it had a lot of magic and it couldn't compete. And so, yeah, the question here is that, you know, is Primordus in the north? I'm not really going to make any speculations either way as to the plausibility of it, but I like the idea of a Frostfire Peaks map. It was, funnily enough, actually, one of the things that I never did a video on with Tyria 3D is the fact there is a map in Tyria 3D of, like, this corner of these 3 maps here for some bizarre reason. And they are all, like, really quartered off. Some of it's very fiery, some of it's very, very icy, and so on. They also did this idea too, and that's the idea of an underwater expansion. This, again, is something crazy to me. Like, we had a lot of desert stuff, we had a lot of Northern Shiver Peak stuff, and we had a lot of underwater stuff. People really like the idea of an underwater X-Pack. I think it's too early. But here's some a couple of maps here. You've got kind of Living World Part 1, as you can see, then Part 2. And then, like, they've even delineated where expansion zones could potentially be. I always like the idea of this stuff being filled in. I feel like with a lot of these squares, they're a little too big. Like, I mean, really, a guild hall this massive would be just enormous. Knowing for a fact that one of ArenaNet's concept for a map was just like this tiny little sliver here is interesting to me. But yes, another interesting idea there from Tyrak. A very similar entry here from Keybirds, who did a flame rising idea. This was some art that they did, showing some Primordus activity, I suppose. But again, we get like another map of the world, as you can see here, that's been uploaded to Imgur, and some progression of maps as we explore. Now, again, it's a nice idea. One of my favorite things to do with speculating about the future is looking at areas of the map that we can end up going. I do think these squares are a little bit too big. I mean, this guild hall is like 2, maybe even 3 Divinity's Reaches, all on its own. Which, I mean, yeah, sure, for those insane guilds and, you know, some proposed new system that ArenaNet have for absolutely abominably large guilds, maybe they could feel something like that. But yeah, pretty interesting, and I like the idea that we could sort of hook around, you know, miss the Verdant Cascades altogether and get to the Isles of Janthir so far. Someone's obviously very excited about the Basalt. Moving briefly away from the idea of map designs categories, let's look at art submissions. Now, art was one of the biggest things I got an awful lot of. We'll open up looking at Skizwig's art of returning to the Char homelands. So again, almost sort of like a new idea here. This really came very, very, very close to being one of the winners, I have to be honest. This thing was awesome to me just because of all the little details down here. Look at the grasping ghouls and the design on that effigy there. It just reminds me of the Eye of the North dungeons in such a wonderful way. This exact room, I know exactly what's being drawn here. Back in the previous game, the original COF, there was a room filled with burning trees and it had all these great post-processing effects on it. It just reminds me of that so well. You've got the undead in here. This was fantastic. So some really nice art of a return to the Char homelands. Next to the category of this ranger, this Asuran ranger, tending to their pets. And it's such a weird art style that I friggin' love. Look at this Asura here. Oh my god, wearing the Jungle Explorer outfit. We got the bristleback and a wyvern pet. This is so cool. And then like even a badass looking little map down there. There was something about this art style that I really enjoyed. Ratatouille floating in the background. Absolutely, really cool piece here. That was from Heck and Sketch, and I was very happy to show you guys. Now, this piece actually from Zyralai here on DeviantArt, but I think it was a different name actually on Reddit. This actually got big just as a regular piece on Guild Wars 2. After they submitted for the competition, regular R Guild Wars 2 ended up getting posted to, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. So this is the idea of a second pale tree. Again, something I think many of us were expecting the expansion. Did recur a few times throughout this competition too. More things that are on people's minds, of course. So this is Malik. This is Malik returning to his tree. Christ knows what's going on. It seems so ominous under the roots there, particularly like the detailing on the rocks for me specifically. But yeah, this was one of a couple of pieces we had revolving around the second tree, and definitely one of the more eye-catching ones. A piece from Alan Fear next, looking towards the Crystal Desert. Now, what I really can't tell here is this creature in the sky, is this Kralkatoric? Or is this something to do with Glint's legacy? There was so much art, specifically in the story category, about Glint's legacy. Now I cannot help but look at it and think, is it got something to do with that? Also, the little people here on this crystal reminds me of a lot of some very official concept art that appears in the first trailer of the original Guild Wars 2 release trailer, where there's some people on a small rock and then like a big dragon head pops around the side. Really nice piece, and I think of everything, I've got to be honest, to play favorites here, I do really like all the ones dealing with the Crystal Desert. That is where I desperately want to go to next. Some people will tell you that that region's boring and that, you know, a barren landscape they can't do very much with, but they proved in GW1 they knew how to do a video game desert very well, and I am really looking forward to seeing how they can adapt that in GW2. This is where I want to go most. Talking about the desert, Daltana had this next submission, which supposedly was made in a really interesting way, and that's that they created the art using Blender, like as a 3D modeling software, then put a filter over it. So he modeled in Blender with mostly procedural textures, which is really cool. It presented a really, really interesting style. Of course, what I can so you can see holding the egg here. But what's most interesting to me is the solitary Colossus back there, or the lone Colossus, the female warrior statue from GW1. If you guys don't know about this thing, it was going to be associated with some significant quests for extra tribute points and stuff in the game, but where you blow it up, but the quest never got fully designed. So in the end in the game, we had something much cooler, in my opinion, which was when you looked from really far away, you could see that the statue was up there, but as you walked closer to it, it appeared in rubble at your feet, and it's the actual body of it became a bridge that you would cross. It was this really cool kind of mysterious thing, and you could even see that statue from Nightfall, when Nightfall came out. I mean, that was just so cool. Really nice that they added it in here, but Crystal Horizon. Next up, we had a pretty cute image from Glazes of Mayasura. So this is one of the this is Liz. Liz is a lady, but if Liz used a total makeover kit and became a man, I'm sure this is exactly how she would end up looking. Pretty badass. And of course, we've got a wicked sick potato staff here with 3 blue gems on it and bees, and then our little icon in the background, the original icon for the channel as well, before we use like the kind of cartoony art one. So yeah, this was very cool. I don't know, I probably play favorites because stuff that's related directly to me is potatoes is more fun, but whatever. Absolutely cool. I really appreciate it. To go through a couple more, Untold Reddit back in mid-November submitted this of, it's an interesting, this is kind of a mix art and story. The idea is that it's someone who got branded as Kralkatorrik flew over but only hit one of their arms. And so it's kind of this really interesting character, actually. I don't think we've had any examples of someone who only gets slightly branded. Or maybe we did, maybe in the books they talk about that. But anyway, I like the idea that you can resist and you just have like one branded arm and it's corrupt, and then you've got the rest of yourself, and now you're waged in this fight against Kralkatorrik and you desperately want to kill him. Really, really cool idea. Very interesting concept. This next one from Alcatapi, I think I'm saying correctly. The previous one was kind of like art and story together. This is almost like map design and art together. And so here we get a nice concept for another Crichton map. I think this was one of the rarer things, the idea that we could go somewhere else. Of course, it was data mined that there was like a Crichton type map that could have been coming with Heart of Thorns and never did in the end. We do have the new Crichton stuff and whatever. But if this is, you know, to the north, if this is Lake Doricas, we can finally get to it. I love it. I love the scale, the scope, the size of this map. Big open field, something that I think a lot of us are probably missing ever since these really, really dense Heart of Thorns maps came out, and that's basically all we've had. So nice, big, open fields to run through. It does definitely invoke a certain feeling that I think Guild Wars 2 lacks at the moment. Feizu did this very cute image here. For some reason reminds me of the Lord of the Rings. I don't know, maybe it's because they look like hobbits. Maybe. But this is kind of to capture the feeling of exploring a new map. Lots of people were making jokes that, of course, this is how people look the second that they realise they can't glide yet in Heart of Thorns. Or maybe more appropriately now, more commonly for many of us, when we go back to the real world and we jump off and we find out that we can't glide. And again, it's got like that extra touch because this is, of course, Liz right here. Just kind of had me sitting here smiling for a while. This next one from Tyrox92. I'm not really sure how it was created, because it almost in some ways looks like a screenshot in-game with the ice or something. But it's like a weird kind of collage blending. It's basically a concept of going north again in the living world and sort of pushing up into the icy climes, and kind of an interesting style to it. Red369 said they were just trying to improve their art skills by drawing the Chuck. This, of course, was not done digitally and is still far, far, far better than anything I could do. So keep at it. It's always nice to see like progress pics people do of, hey, this is the first Chuck I drew 3 years ago, and this is the one I drew this year, and it's some badass ridiculous looking thing. Finally, this one was actually a mix of art and story. This is the Quaggan King. Now, I'd love to read the little story that was written with this, which was very, very cool. But I'm just not going to have time. So the next and final category to look into, guys, are the stories. Now, the stories I can't easily show to you all. I've kind of been trying different ideas with this video, but they just all end up enormous, where I like try and pick nice little moments and passages from the stories, but we had a lot of fan fiction. The fan fiction, more than anything else, took me a long time to get through. So I'm going to list out the stuff. I'm going to say what I liked about it. If you've submitted something, hopefully you hear your thing said here at the very least. And I would really recommend you guys check out the link down below to read some of these stories, because I'll give you the synopsis, and if it sounds good, I would say go for it, because a lot of it was very, 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 very high quality. All right, so the first story to talk about is from Nomad Soul 9, who did a story about Ritlock meeting Traherne in the mist in the Woodland Cascade. So immediately in a cool area, straight away. The story is called Springing the Trap. It was very well written, but what I thought was really quite cool about this story in particular was it went into a lot of detail about how exactly revenants commune with the dead. I mean, a lot of us have kind of got a stick up our backsides right now because ArenaNet didn't give us very much about this, specifically with Ritlock, and it's a little more on that perspective. And I think it's important to give that perspective too, for what it's worth, because Guild Wars as a franchise, even back in Guild Wars 1, kind of had a problem with this. For example, the core game, you had a character, Gwen, whose mother, Sarah, died. At the end of Eye of the North, they had all these missions where you went to speak to her mother in the underworld. You could just, like, freely go there back in GW1. It was like, why did anyone mourn any of their dead if it was that easy to commune? But it went into a lot of detail on that. I thought that was really, really, really fantastic. Alan Arthur did a story dealing specifically with Traherne's clones. And it has a really, really, really decent ending to it. Again, some of this stuff, it feels like if I say too much, it's going to spoil it. Lots of people had nice twist endings and stuff. But it's really cool in the story section here, actually, to see all the different little things people fixated on. You know, some people will fixate on the Revenant stuff. Some people fixated on the Traherne clones that could potentially still be running around there. There will be spoilers for the story as we go forward in this little section, guys, of the video, just to let you know. Actually, I don't think I'd quite appreciated how cool some of those stories could be with the remaining Traherne that we saw being built in a cutscene. And, you know, it doesn't seem too implausible that ArenaNet could go into that as well at some point. Next, there were basically a collection of lots of little short stories that expressed different ideas about where the living world can go. And that was from Spanx a lot too. They said, oh, I think a lot of this is crazy and, you know, it's probably never going to happen. I don't think so much of it is as crazy as you might think. But as a good example here as well, one of the first little stories you read from Spanx a lot was the idea, lovely name by the way, of the untrustworthy Kaith stuff. You know, one of my big complaints about the story was that Kaith was so untrustworthy and never became anything, so what if it does become something? And little things like that were interesting reads. There's a lot in that one. Brandon41 as well did kind of a cool story and a map design. I can't easily show them because they're basically just massive blocks of text. And it is true that you can submit more than one thing if you want. I mean, if you're being creative in different ways each time, then why not? Next story is from Da'an, who did a story about reclaiming Glint's egg. Instead of doing some story about Season 3, which really was just a prompt for this competition, you know, they weren't invalidated for this. Instead, they looked at a part of the actual Heart of Thorn storyline that was fairly weak in their eyes, and wrote a fan fiction, like a novelization, if you will, of that specific little moment. And that's the moment where you take Glint's egg. And it's kind of like a communication between you and the egg as you get it, and you kind of proving yourself as a hero. Why do you have any claim to it? Any more claim, say, than Kaith? I like it when people skirted the boundaries a little, because it didn't have to be exclusively about Season 3. It was just a prompt. The Panda Heart did another story that's specifically about... How do I say this without it being a spoiler? About something in the jungle, okay? But kind of gave an interesting Sylvari perspective, and there was one thing that I really wanted to pull out of this that I really liked, and that's... They focus a lot on Sylvari bioluminescence, and the idea of a Sylvari trying to sneak around. That's not easy when you glow in the dark. Something I'd never really considered, and that actually drove a little bit of the story there. So that was nice. And that's the kind of thing I think that fanfiction stuff can really pull on that the game doesn't show you sometimes. So that was very cool. And lastly, very, very narrowly, I have to say, missing a win on this competition was a story from Great Mar 2, who was discussing the idea, first of all, of an expansion where we go to the desert. But it really, instead of fixating on the desert itself, kind of talked more about us getting there and what would happen when we get there straight away. And I think did some really, really great stuff in this story, spliced in a couple of screenshots of different areas in-game that they were talking about. When a lot of people think of the desert, I think they think of going south through Ebonhawk, but this story actually presents a really interesting argument for not going through that Ebonhawk gate to the Crystal Desert, but instead going through Mount Maelstrom, sailing along the Sea of Elon, and, you know, the idea that you could take existing packed camps, at least in the first half of the story, and building them up because the supply lines are going to be running through there. And the story may not have explicitly stated this, but this immediately got my mind thinking, yeah, that would work really well because the Zephyrite have got a lot to do with Glint. The Zephyrite may have some, you know, stake in a story where we go back to the desert with Kralkatorrik, and if we go past Mount Maelstrom, well, that takes us very close to the Labyrinthine Cliffs too. That could be an easy way for that to become a regular map in the game. There's just a lot of cool little things that this story made me think of. It was well written, and then when we get there as well, it did a good job integrating the various characters, right? Because we've got a lot of characters going on at the moment. Some stories just neglected to talk about a lot of stuff. But, you know, this kind of gave interesting things for Destiny's Edge to do, as well as the main character. Basically made me want The Last Guardian, with a kind of a cool idea of a connection between the player character and Glint's legacy and the egg. So yeah, that's the bulk of the submissions. Not every single one. I apologize if yours never made it into the video, but let's have a look at the 5 winners. This is in no particular order, but these 5 submissions above all others really caught me. Number 1 here is the Forgotten Waters map design. This was submitted by Utterly Rob, and really goes to show you just by pulling some good images off of Google, having a strong idea, and playing around for a little while, you can really get the creativity going. So this is a new map called the Repressed Sluice, I believe. And the idea is this friggin' basin, this lagoon, just a little bit north of where the raid currently is. This would be where the season continues to pick up. I've wanted to go here since friggin' Guild Wars 1. So straight away, they've got a really good idea for a setting. They dropped a bunch of different points of interest in there, explained exactly where they are. You know, like Perilous Landing is where we end up zoning into the map. But what they really got a lot of kudos, even beyond just the presentation of this for me, you know, even discussing some of the enemies, is the lore and the story based behind a map like this. Because as it was stated in the thread, this is an adventurous idea, all right, to say the least. This is the idea of tying the Deep Sea Dragon with the Masat and the Karka. And that's the kind of thing that really there isn't much precedent for it. But especially when I ended up looking at their forum post that they made on this topic a while ago, I think they were really unfairly shot down over really stupid reasons. And kind of, once again, I saw an interesting creative theory be crapped on, which is a real shame. And I like to see that didn't deter Rob. And they continued on with this idea, and we have the Forgotten Waters here. So this is one of the winners. Congratulations. The next submission is from Dazzler777, who actually did 2 different art pieces. This is sort of from the art category, just like raw art here. The first of the 2 pieces, as you can see here, is of the Dominion of Winds. We get to see the Tengu. The perspective on this kind of makes my head hurt, actually, a little. But clearly a lot of effort gone into showing a couple of the Tengu off here. This alone wouldn't have been enough to have won it for me, even though it is a very striking piece. But in addition as well, they submitted this piece of Glint's legacy. Now, make no mistake, this isn't Glint itself. This is Glint's offspring from the egg. And apparently they had to redo an awful lot of it. But really, really fantastic images. Some real talent behind these, and a lot of man-hours to get them produced, I guess. So congratulations on that to you, Dazzler777. The next winner, once again, is kind of in the raw art category. And once again, actually, is 2 images too. This first piece from Concept Cube, No Man's Land, and then the second, World Tree. Once again, this is another idea of the other pale tree, the pale tree we never got to see in the video jungle. And what I really liked about these was they are emulating ArenaNet's art style very well. Is it technically their art style? But this very specific style that we so associate with Guild Wars 2, I think has absolutely been nailed here. And of course, the idea of some more art coming out of the Fire Island chain, or freaking even just the other pale tree, and the scale of this tree is just phenomenal. I absolutely love the idea. I think it's really, really fantastic, and a well-deserved win for me. Just 2 more now. The next winner was Bdor24, who had a story. Now, I got a lot of stories came in. This one I felt was the most well-written. This one really was very, very easy for me to read through. Absolutely grabbed me. I will say very little about this story, as I don't want to spoil it. I definitely encourage you guys to read this one, and all of the stories were actually really good. But this one specifically, the original post about it was just a fan fiction powers activate, and it seemed like a very unassuming submission. But the idea, I would just say, behind this story is after a big celebration in the name of Esther Galkin in Holbrack, a person enters the city. That's it. It's got a fantastic, and it's just so well written. It's not stupidly over the top. Really, really well done. I could expect ArenaNet to do this story as well. It's plausible, it was a fun read, and a really interesting idea. So it pretty much hit all the categories for me. This was my favorite story that I had come in. And then lastly, the winner, through sheer force of will and effort, from Chlamydio, wonderful name, by the way, who did a map design. And this map design really goes on and on and on. This is the idea of a map that takes place in the Rata Novus main complex. Now, what immediately should strike you about that fact, this could actually happen. They've already established quite heavily that we're probably going to do something to do with, Timey in Rata Novus and that door that we saw in the achievement for one of the missions during Heart of Thorns. And while it's very plausible in that sense, they kind of designed a map here that works a lot like Dragonstand. It's like a giant mission. And the amount of detail, the amount of lore, the amount of work in being creative with the style of event. They're not just all boring escorts and defenses and copy-paste of things we've seen before. They integrate interesting PvP ideas there. The dialogue sometimes can be a little hit or miss. But, when we're dealing with such a quantity here, I think that's fairly forgivable. Eventually starts dealing with stuff to do with the Elder Dragons and very quickly moving the story on for the next season of The Living World. So much art has been done, or like graphics to demonstrate how some of these events are going to be working. Really, really fantastic submission. I mean, a video like this is not the place to go through, but if you guys want to read this and really get lost in some of the ideas, some of the things that ArenaNet can actually do with this game, I would definitely recommend checking out this link as well. So, definite winner from me here. Really, really fantastic submissions all around, guys. Thanks very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed participating in the competition. What I'm actually going to do is let gems build up again and do another big competition maybe next quarter, so keep an eye out for that. But this was just the art contest. We let it run for long enough that there were definitely an awful lot of things for me to go through. So yeah, thanks very much, guys. I will leave you on one final submission. Wasn't a winner or anything, but I thought it was pretty cool. And that was a wrap for me, Wooden Potatoes. Possibly one of the cringiest things I've ever done in my life. Here we go. Oh, God. Living World Season 3. Sounds like a party. Heard there's a new map. Hope it's not crap. I think there will be fire. A statue I can admire. Everything will be so new. I will gather my crew. Together we will go explore everywhere. From the highest hills to the secret lair. Hopefully there will be some new features, along with some new creatures. Afraid they will run. It will be so much fun. I'm gonna have a great time. Wooden Potatoes. Hope you liked my rhyme. Alright, that was terrible. Never again.